Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Game Hub. I'm your host Gamer K, and it's time for the second video of my Spider-Month themed month. The J. Jonah Jameson video was a great start, and I got 3 more videos down the line, including a Tales from the Convention that definitely is Spider-Man related. I'll get to that when I get to it. But for now, what is a hero without the villains to fight him? And for this video, it is going to be my top 13 Spider-Man villains. And just like I did with my Batman villains list many years ago, I'm going to be going over the villains of Manhattan's Best, of the villains for Spider-Man that I really enjoyed throughout my life. And I got into Spider-Man pretty kind of early in life. I started with reruns of the 1994 series. I've seen that very, very bizarre, the new animated series that had Neil Patrick Harris for a reason. And then I watched the 1994, no, not the 1994, Spectacular Spider-Man, which was the last good one. I don't care what anyone says. And I played a lot of the video games, and I watched the movies. So my kind of knowledge of Spider-Man goes from those. The animated series, some of the video games, the movies. Because I wasn't that much of a comic book person when I was younger. I didn't read a lot of Spider-Man comics. I didn't read a lot of comics in general, because it just wasn't my thing. So I'm going over the villains in my own retrospect, based on my overall enjoyment of them, and kind of referencing a bunch of different their forms and versions throughout the series that I've seen. And again, this is a list of my enjoyment of the villains, and yeah, so some villains may be on this list, some villains may not. Also, to reiterate, kind of what like I did with the Batman list, I am not counting Black Cat as a villain. Because, yeah, she is a villain, but most of the time, she's the anti-hero, the femme fatale to Spider-Man, where Catwoman is the Batman. So, the Naughty Kitty is off the list. But her goddamn amazing artwork is still on my wall for this video. So, it's time for, let's swing into Gamer K's top 13 Spider-Man villains. Why top 13? Because here in the Game Hub, only the odd can be number 1. Let's begin. You know what? We're starting off pretty good with a villain that is the right amount of menacing, the right amount of evil, but somewhere in between, you can find a lot of sympathy and a lot of tragedy in certain villains. And that's a good thing with a bunch of villains. They don't choose to be villains, just some accidents happen, and yeah, they turn into the villains. In case, Curt Connors, aka the Lizard. Shockingly, in a good majority of the series, the Lizard is one of the first villains that Spidey fights. I mean, he was the first one in the 94 version, which is one of the better iterations of the villain. He was the third villain to be fought in Spectacular, and it was a one and done, and I'm kind of glad for that. And then they had the absolute nerve to use him for the Amazing Spider-Man movie. And this is what we get? Okay. It's very clear that that movies are not the best thing for reptilian monsters. Because comic books have failed twice, and oh no, wait, there is a famous lizard. It's called Godzilla. Why can't you use some of that into this? Because this looks cheap. Very, very cheap. Anyway, Dr. Curt Connors was a geneticist who had suffered an injury in his life, which resulted in the loss of his arm. I think either his left arm or this arm. I can't remember which one. So he started experimenting with lizard DNA, because as people know, lizards have the ability to grow off their limbs after a while. So yeah, that worked well. One man tried to cure his deafness and became a giant bat. One man tried to regrow his arm and became a giant lizard. Fan-effing-tastic, guys. Seriously, when are scientists going to learn that genetic manipulation is not the best way to go if you want to help the world? I don't know, but it makes for great villains. Having the ability, I mean, it's not an ability where you can go in and out of the lizard. It's more like the serum, or the, not serum. I can't find the words. The concoction that created the lizard keeps his mind and his memory, until later on he becomes so obsessed with turning the world into a reptilian paradise. Someone should really contact him with Mesagog, because they could work together, in all honesty. And then they brought him back, brought him in and return for Spider-Man 2, and gave us one of the coolest boss fights ever. Like, making him supersized with an increase of injection, and making him monstrous sized, and his scream hurting the Venom symbiote suit. Yes! This is how you use a character's attributes well in a boss fight. And the lizard did a great job of giving us a great environmental chase and boss fight. Still not as creepy as Killer Croc Slayer, but you know what? The lizard did well. Whether there's a scientist character or an intelligent character in a rogues gallery, more often than not, there's one type that is always dubbed as the dumb one of the entire operation. That is the muscle type of villain. These are villains who don't really care for plans and think they can just rush through everything in their path. Case in point, rhinos. If you don't get that joke, we can't be friends and we can't be cool. I am, of course, talking about... what was his name? I know I should have this information, but this is another thing where some of the characters get a kind of a reimagining into becoming something different. Because this character isn't the only one in the series in anything to, let's see. Seriously, yes, I know I should get this done immediately, but do you know how many top villains I had to pick from? Do you think I had the time to go over every single one's identities? Really? You think I have that much time? I know I say I'm a cheap Canadian production, but I have a life. I'm going to ignore that comment. Here we go. From being Alex O'Hearn or Alexei Setsevich, we have the unstoppable mammal, the rhino. Funny thing is, I used to have a rhino toy when I was younger, but I didn't know what it was because the color was all brown and everything, and I didn't know what it was until I took a very deep look at it. But the rhino costume has gone through exclusive changes throughout the series. We have the original one where it looks like an actual giant rhino costume that's almost as impervious as a tank. Then we had this one from the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2. Is that Marty Wolf from Big Fat Liar? Okay, so you kill Gwen Stacy, aka Emma Stone, aka best version of Gwen Stacy ever outside of the Spectacular series, and you give us this at the end? That is wrong on so many levels, but I digress. Or we get the Spectacular Spider-Man version, where it was an experiment to create supervillains, where the material has merged in with Rhino's skin, making him absolutely impervious, except rhinos have no sweat glands and everything, so getting him into the steam tunnels and making it super hot in there really screwed him over. Wow, Jim Carrey predicted a way of how to beat the rhino. Kudos when nature calls. You did something right. And then we get the cybernetic armor that is infused with this Russian. Because, of course, they had to make the Rhino a Russian, and a badass Russian to be, like, fighting Rhino is not easy in any version. Except Miles Morales, when he's reused twice, and hey, it was, again, another great chase scene for the start of the game. So, one of the reasons I love Rhino is because no matter what iteration he's in, again, they don't change too much that makes it unrecognizable. Whether it's an actual Rhino suit that's impervious or a metallic suit with a Rhino aesthetic. It, again, is one of my favorite brute over brain bosses ever. And I just wish that they used him a little bit more in video games. Like, he wasn't used in the Shattered Dimensions one. Neither was the Lizard. But we had Juggernaut and Deadpool. So something had to be mixed in there. So I don't get it. But again, I love the Rhino because there are multiple times when he gets a good laugh out of me at it being a bumbling idiot that is so clueless and easily fooled. Which, again, is the part of the charm of that dumb, strong villain type. And Rhino is a prime example of it. I just wish they do something more with him in future iterations. When there's a supervillain, there's normally going to have to be the basic villains that aren't so infused with their own power. And every villain has this. Batman has Black Mask, Carmine Falcone, and the Penguin. And Spidey has the amazingly powerful, from behind the shadows, Wilson Fisk, a.k.a. the Kingpin. Now, I still have my old Kingpin action figure when I was younger. And oh boy, was I weirded out because I didn't know what it was because most of these toys came from my cousin. When I saw the big dude with the small head, I laughed. But then when I watched the Spider-Man show, holy shit, Kingpin isn't just the businessman in an oversized, suit. He is a badass who can throw down. And that is something I love about Kingpin. And not only, I still need to finish the last season of Daredevil, but Vincent D'Onofrio, fantastic actor, played the role so freaking well, giving us an in-depth analysis into Wilson Fisk's life. And it's completely effed up in numerous ways, but at the same time, it makes him a human character. And knowing that he can go toe-to-toe with Spidey, even without superpowers, makes him a fantastic villain in and of itself. In any iteration. Except in the one where he was basically a pimp boss who liked cheeseburgers. I didn't say all Spider-Man iterations were great, okay? But again, from the 94 version where he was the main threat throughout most of the entire series, to the Spider-Verse first movie where his story is so tragic that I was upset, but he's still a boss nonetheless. To Vincent D'Onofrio's version, to being voiced by Travis Willingham for the Spider-Man games. There is very little I can say about Kingpin, but the reason, again, he's on the lower half of this list is because as great as he is, he only became a big thing kind of recently. Well, not recently, but like when Daredevil came out, when Across the Spider-Verse came out, and when the Spider-Man game came out. Wilson Fisk was kind of just a forgotten name in the Spider-Man lore, and I'm happy that they brought him back in the best ways possible. So I'm hoping that we see more of Wilson ruling New York pretty soon, hopefully. Yeah, like, I wasn't gonna have that be the entrance for this villain. They didn't get to do it in Spider-Man 2, and yet Yuri Lowenthal did emo Peter Parker dance at a Comic-Con, but we do get, I am still getting this. Herman Schultz, or AKA Montana, the Shocker, one of my favorite old school villains that has, in every iteration, has definitely shocked me to my fan base core. From the 94 version where he was just a soldier who donned an amazing suit and quite possibly giving us one of the most iconic memes ever. To the 94 version where he's a bounty hunter with a Montana accent, constantly calling Spider-Man Bug, and with that freaking accent and just the ability to with his shock gauntlets. It's just and to Spider-Man 1 where we get a great chase scene and boss battle. Shame he goes away in number 2, and that's kind of odd and bad, but overall, Herman Schultz is a great villain. The Shocker is something really super amazing. I love it to death in any iteration, and I just love that no matter what version of Shocker they do, he still has that classic yellow-brown suit with the shock gauntlets. And it's something that is, that's something I love within certain series. No matter how many times you change a character throughout the years, if you keep that one essence of them that people are going to remember for years and that can quickly identify said villain, that is what Shocker is to me. He is that one villain, no matter what changes they make to him, as long as the suit is the same and his constant bickering with Spidey makes him a memorable villain. And I know I'm going through some of these a little fast, but 13 amazing villains, and I gotta trying to cut down on time so I don't go for almost 2 hours talking about this. Hey, I gotta shock it out. Who wrote this? Yeah, I know. I need to get writers. I know. I most likely won't, but whatever. Shocker makes it over the bottom part of the list, because the 3 villains don't appear in all. No, wait, they do. Okay, I don't know what I'm talking about. I like Shocker because of his aesthetic, his abilities, personality in any version. And again, in the 94, we still get that amazing line. Shame Shocker hasn't been in a movie. Nope, he hasn't been in a movie. That was just a quick thing. Don't start. Okay. Here's a mystery for you. How does a villain, the main threat of a video game, where he is voiced by David fucking K, aka Beast Wars Megatron, end up becoming Jake Gyllenhaal, where he's okay, yeah, in the video game he was a charlatan too who used his tricks, but then he gained real magical abilities to be a charlatan who worked for freaking Tony Stark, and just as revenge for making a mockery of him. I'm sorry. I can bag on so much, but that twist for Spider-Man No Way Homecoming, Far From Home, there we go, Far From Home, I'm sorry, I can't let that slide. As much as I liked the movie in bits, this was one of my least favorite parts of it. I am talking about Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio. Seriously, a grudge with Tony Stark because he made fun of your invention? Really? And they lie, and they tricked us in the trailers by having Molten Man, Sandman, and Hydro Man. 3 unique villains, one of them who is on the list, and 2 of them who are underrated villains, only to be elemental threats so Quentin can gain Nick Fury's trust? Are you shitting me? Oh my god, I need a drink after that. I should really put alcohol in this after that. Okay. My rant aside, the good Mysterios, like I stated, are some of the better ones done in recent years. From the great 94 one where he was a special effects guy who wanted to get revenge on the people who fired him by claiming to be a sorcerer when it's really just movie magic. And it really incompensates how Spidey can't just trust his eyes, but his spider sense. I love it whenever a villain forces the hero to change up their tactics in a great way that can later be implemented in future villains and fights. To the spectacular version where, again, he was part of the 3-man crew that basically tried to ruin Spider-Man's name, and then he became the Great Mysterio, who was an actor and not just a special effects wizard. I love it. Hey, special effects! Okay, full disclosure, I just got it now. I'm not kidding. A special effects wizard, and he's literally a special effects wizard. I'm not fucking joking. 29 years old, and I just got the wordplay. What? I'm not. This isn't bullshitting. I fully didn't get what they were going for it. Stan Lee, you magnificent bastard, you. Oh, that was genius. That was actual genius. To, like I said, the video game where David K plays him, and he has magical powers in this one, and he's the main threat, and it's amazing. 2, Spider-Man 2, where Bubblehead returns in a side mission for Miles. I'll talk about that when I do the review. The one thing I love about Quentin Beck as a character and not just Mysterio is how, again, consistent they've been. Except for the one I ranted about earlier. No matter what they do, they're still somehow a charlatan using their technological know-how to pretend to be all-powerful and mystical and magical. It's definitely showcasing how a lot of magicians use fancy tricks and how a bunch of psychics and mentalists use tricks in order to fool people, and how easy it is for people to get fooled. And in the second game of Marvel's Spider-Man, it is done in spades of how well they transform the character. After rehabilitating and using his technological prowess to create an interactive system at the fair. Again, this one threw me for a loop twice. Like, I thought, like, going through the side missions, you tend to think, okay, yeah, there's no way they're going to go the route they're going to go. They're going to go in the obvious route, but they're going to trick us, making us think it's not the obvious route. But then at the end, I'm starting to think, wait a minute. Like, a little hiccup broke it for me, and I'm like, oh my God, they did. They double faked us. And I'm not exposing it until maybe I do a video for that, where moments where I thought, like, shock moments. Yeah, I can do shock moments for that, for a video. Basically, yeah. Quentin Beck being an actor, an electronics specialist, and a true thespian of a villain, there is no telling where this mysterious villain is going to come out next. And honestly, I'll be there with a round of applause. Okay. This is a villain that has only been used once, but I love him immensely because of how well it's done. And as I'm going to say in a video later this week, I gave this idea to one of the voice actors of the Spider-Man games, and he was enthralled with how much not enthralled, but he was really hearing what I was saying about a great idea for a new villain for Miles that has no connection to Peter. And he loved the idea. So if I ever run into him again, I hope he remembers this shit-eating grin. I am talking about a villain from the 94 series, Alistair Smythe. This villain is completely out of the box, guys. Completely out of the box, out of left field. For Alice, and I believe I said this in an old video for ideas for the next Spider-Man game. And I'm surprised of how kind of accurate I was in a majority of those. Go to my old video. Links right here. I can't believe how accurate I was on some of my predictions. So going back to Alistair Smythe, this is the son of a brilliant scientist who was working with Fisk in the beginning, trying to we had a deal that they made, but he had to work for him. And Alistair, being paralyzed from the waist down in a wheelchair, definitely was motivation enough for Smythe to continue working. After a lab explosion that resulted in his father being dead and pretty much blaming Spider-Man for it, teams up with Fisk in order to take down the webhead. And how does he do this? By creating the Spider Slayers. Giant robots that symbolize Spider's natural enemies. Commitment to a redhead. Booyah! Finally, I was able to do a joke like that, and it actually worked. Although now that the ending of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is anything to be believed, and I did the joke regardless. I don't care. So a big thing for the Spider Slayers is spiders don't really work well together. They're lone arachnids, and that's the difference between arachnids and insects. Insects work together. Arachnids are solo creatures. So creating them as a Black Widow, a tarantula, and a Deathstalker scorpion, holy mother of God. And the fact that these things can merge together to create an unstoppable weapon. But that's not just why Alistair's on this list. Episodes later, like many episodes, seasons later, Alistair Smythe gets concocted in a genetic experiment of his own creation, which turns him into a monstrous mutant. And now that I'm remembering this, Amazing Spider-Man 1 video game that had zero gall to do with the movie did Alistair Smythe and his gene splicing monsters, and it was shit. It was absolute shit. Having these genetic abilities and being stronger so he doesn't need his cybernetic wheelchair anymore, and going off to revenge for Spider-Man on his own. Because like the old saying goes, if you want the job done right, get your hands dirty and bash a spider into a wall. Alistair Smythe is on my list because of how unique of a villain he is. He didn't start out as a menace. He was basically a guy whose father would do anything to secure funding to help him get his legs back. And in turn, a son who would do anything to avenge his father's death. So with the Spider Slayers and his alternate mutated form, Alistair Smythe may have only been in one iteration via media outside of comics. And a shitty version, which was a bad video game, a very, very bad video game. I see potential for Smythe to return as the new Spider-Man's magnum opus villain. And for the love of God, don't make him a twist again. Because I saw that first one a mile away. Or should I say, miles away. I never knew how many jokes I could get out of this. I still think that this villain deserves his respect, deserves his, at most, a rebirth into the next legacy of Spider-Man. Only time will tell, so I'm hoping. My big complaint about this one villain is that he is one of my personal favorites, but he was never included in Spectacular Spider-Man. Which sucks a lot. But I do love this villain nonetheless in any of his iterations. I'm talking about from petty anti-criminal to being paid by J. Jonah Jameson to go under experimentation to take out the web crawler. No, yeah, go look it up on the 94 series. That actually happened in the first couple episodes. To being outright forgotten in one of my favorites, to being in the video games twice and actually getting an on-screen death. I'm talking about the first natural predator of the spider, the Scorpion, aka Matt Gargan, and in one future iteration, Kron Stoner. The Scorpion is without a doubt one of my favorite villains. I mean, I know I say that a lot about these villains, and even though he's only number 7 on this list, he is without a doubt one of my favorites because of the motif, a scorpion. And how often can you do a scorpion villain that isn't kind of redundant or goofy looking? From the original, where he's genetically enhanced into a suit with a tail that shoots acid, with a sharp stinger at the end and able to contort the tail via an implant, to being again a cybernetic suit that is as tactical and as sick and cool as rhinos, with pretty good agile ability, and in the case of the boss fight, with a toxic poison sting that sends us into basically Marvel's answer to how can we make the Scarecrow scenes, but for Spider-Man, aka a toxic hallucinogenic venom that makes the city submerged in poison with giant tails coming out to get you. Yes! And he's just a badass villain. I'm mad that he was never in Spectacular, because they could have done so much with it. And also the version from Spectacular Spider-Man, Shattered Dimensions, where we fight him as the 2099 Spider-Man, Miguel. Okay, you know what? Because I mentioned his name, yeah, I had to include it. And pretty much that music is absolutely badass. Kronstoner was a student in the year 2099 who accidentally got into a lab accident and created into this mutated version of Scorpion, which is so sick and freaking cool that I absolutely love. You know what? Shattered Dimensions needs to get a remastered version, and maybe change some stuff about it. Just take the script, because I want to replay these bosses. So much so that me and E, when we were in high school, we would come up with ideas for Shattered Dimensions 2 with all the villains that they didn't use. And yet we got Edge of Time. Why? Regardless of that, Scorpion is still a great boss, a great villain, and anytime I hear even a little bit of that stinging tail rise out of the spider's back, it gets my blood going, because I love scorpions. I am a Scorpio, but it's still a great villain. So much so, someone made a fan-made trailer for Season 3 of Spectacular, and they included Scorpion, and it looked glorious. Oh, so glorious. And I'm never forgiving Disney for being the reason why it was canceled. Once again, another personal favorite of mine, and a villain that more than once got redemption. But I still love him as a villain, but he's not an evil villain. He's... Funnily enough, this villain never made an appearance in the 94 series. Became one of my favorites in the Spectacular series. Was in 2 of the video games that I played, got in a movie, made a return, and got redemption every single time. I'm talking about Flint Marko, the Sandman. Definitely one of my favorite elemental villains of Spidey. In any iteration, he's always a petty thief who's trying to do better or wants to succeed at being a criminal. Either way, either from circumstance or the love of his daughter. In 2 iterations, we get that. 2. And both of them were years apart. So I'm glad they stuck with that exact same premise for Marko. And his boss fights are always amazing. From chucking water at him in the Shattered Dimensions game, where he can have every more power control of sand and making him into a colossus, and to a sandstorm with his consciousness being split into a very impressive boss fight. I'm not going to lie, one of my personal favorites. To being the first boss fight in the second game, which was awesome, and giving us an amazing side mission to incorporate what he was worried about, and to give it a satisfying conclusion. Giving him the redemption of being a villain that he was for all those years, because Kraven was after his ass and wanting to make sure his daughter was safe. And I didn't notice this until I examined it. The fragments of his memories in the Spider-Man 2 game fit together into a statue of him holding his daughter. That is fucking brilliant. Insomniac, give your people a raise, give them paid vacation, round of applause. The game alone, no, that side mission alone justifies this villain's existence in the game. And as great as he is as a villain, his abilities make him what he is. From being a regular thug to being superpowered, making his body into sand, which really works when he needs to avoid being hit, unless he's been hit by water, and then he solidifies. Seriously, desert sand villains, you're all the same! You're all the same! God! Go build a sandcastle, why don't all of you? But my favorite iteration outside of the video games and the movie, the third Sam Raimi movie did Sandman great. Peter was out for revenge for him being one of the people who took Uncle Ben away. Great tying it into the last movie of that, by the way. That was one of the few things I really enjoyed it. And getting accidentally into this genetic experiment thing where he was in sand and then it moleculated into his body. He wasn't a villain. He was just a guy who got a bum deal, a bum rap, and it just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled. And in the Spectacular series, he partners with O'Hearn, aka Rhino, as petty thieves, but he wants a big score. And the last episode we get from him is one of my favorites, and it showcases John DiMaggio's acting chops. Yeah, Sandman is voiced by Bender Jake Rath. Who else? Draken. Yes. In an episode where he's showing his soft spot to a little girl on the beach for being bullied at the beach by guys, and then Hammerhead comes in and tells him to get, after all the crime bosses take their cut, he's left with nothing, so he tells him to go big, and it's to destroy an oil tanker, which he kind of does. And using the sand at the bottom of the ocean to compensate himself. And after fighting Spidey for a little bit, and he ends up saving the oil workers after it almost goes boom. This scene always gets me every single time I watch it.
I was just in it for the bucks. I never meant for this to happen. Wait, Sandy, let go!
One of my favorite moments. It's one of my favorite moments from the Spectacular Spider-Man series because, yeah, he's a villain. He always tries to get cash and always tries to get rich and always takes a fight with Spidey. But Sandman would never put innocent lives at risk. He's one of those villains that is so badass, but at the same time, you just feel bad for him. And I love that about Sandman. He's a great villain. He's a great sympathetic villain. Great abilities. Great character from start to finish. And pretty much every version he's in. And it does very well. I just can't wait for the next iteration of Sandman. But they need to keep that green striped shirt with him. I'm just going to say, that's his trademark. Come out to play, Spider-Man. The Green Goblin is here to bring the fun. Yeah, the Green Goblin isn't at the top of the list, guys. I swear to God, I have my reasons. From every version of Green Goblin, except that grotesque one in Shattered Dimensions, which is awful. Well, not awful, but not the best. Oh my God, though. Green Goblin. the Joker, basically the Joker to Spider-Man's Batman. An absolute nutcase at the time with his unmistakable green attire from metallic armor to a fun cavalcade of madness that Spectacular Spider-Man gave us, from diabolical portrayals from Willem Dafoe in the first movie and bringing him back. I still need to watch the third movie, which I will be doing pretty soon. But God fucking damn it. Willem Dafoe playing the Green Goblin all those years ago, but he has not played fucking Joker yet. What are you doing, DC? What are you doing? You gave this guy a chance to be Joker, and that was as bad as... Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I almost made a joke that would have been on the same level as Joker, but I decided to cut that joke completely because it would be in very bad taste to make a joke like that, because I'm not that kind of guy to make super dark jokes like that in the name of good fun. So instead of that, Willem Dafoe played Ryuk in the live-action Death Note. So why not give him the Joker, guys? Like I almost said before, you let this guy be Joker, and it bombed hard. So why not? And now, instead of my favorite purple villain, let's go back to one of my favorite green villains. From the metallic orange eyes to his infamous glider, fitted out with pumpkin-looking bombs, to spikes, to lasers coming out of his glider, and even more so, the Spectacular Spider-Man version, voiced... Okay, we all know who the character is underneath, and it's played by two different people. Voiced by Steve Bloom himself. Oh my God, telling him that he is one of my favorite Green Goblins ever really made him laugh and smile and say that he loved doing the role. It was so comical and creepy, but at the same time menacingly enough. And even I was thrown for a loop with the twist that they decided to do in the first season. But at the same time, once the reveal happened, I'm like, okay, like they don't... The one thing I loved about the Spectacular Spider-Man one when it came to the Green Goblin is that he had the mannerisms, the wordplay he would do, the moves he did. And it just screamed originality. Yeah, we can take the Goblin, say anyone can be Norman Osborn and throw him into the suit and say he's the Green Goblin, but it takes a lot of skill to make you think that he's not the Green Goblin and it's someone else entirely, and make it work to such a degree. The Green Goblin is menacing. The Joker to Spider-Man's Batman. The Moriarty to Spider-Man Sherlock Holmes. He is a villain that is the nit at every point in a Spider-Man's life. And I'm mad that and the 1994 version that was not utilized as well. I mean, when I love Green Goblin, I love the Spectacular version, or Willem Dafoe's. The 94 one kind of took a back seat for a majority. Wasn't that huge of a threat. And I'm kind of glad I never read the comics because from watching Atop the Fourth Wall and learning kind of the effed up shit that Norman Osborn has done, it's quite fucking terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. So yeah, Gobby gets on the top 4 of the list. Wait, 4? top 5 of the list. Because of his integration, his abilities, his the sadistic charisma that the Goblin has in any iteration, the gadgets, the wordplay, the absolute ability to get underneath webhead's skin and strike where he needs to, and the pure intellect that could definitely make Joker run from the funny house. Gabi, I hope to see you soon in the next game where we finally get the final chapter. Yes, we will. When that voice hit trailers, people were going crazy. I met the actor in real life, the voice actor, before he was even announced for this role. But I'll discuss that when I talk about meeting him. It was one of the best things ever. Such a voice to pick for a toxicating villain. And I like doing voices. And oh dear God, I am talking about the maniacal menace that encapsulated Peter Parker's identity and gave him a change of identity. We are Venom. Sorry, I love Venom so much. I mean, one of my absolute favorite villains. Even though in recent years they've made him into an absolute hero or anti-hero, which to be fair, they did in the 1994 movie version. And they completely made a mockery of him in the last Sam Raimi movie. And then they tried to make him a hero again when Drake Bell was Peter Parker. But the 1994 version, Spectacular, and this video game, and Marvel 2, Spider-Man 2, really brought back what Venom was. A bloodthirsty monster. But at the same time, the game did change things a little bit. But I'm not mad at it. I actually enjoyed the changes because it wasn't going to be... I mean, a lot of people kind of saw it coming because of the setup that they did. And at the same time, it still worked. I thought it was going to be cheesy. And I thought, okay, they're going to have... you-know-who be Venom, and it's not going to be that absolute badass. So, what did we get from it? Venom with wings. Venom with wings? He's glorious. He is absolutely glorious. And yes, we do get to play with him a little bit in the game, but at the same time, I'm okay that it was only a little bit. But Venom, oh my God, in any iteration, you are just a menace. From manipulating Peter's mind and attitude to making him into an a-hole, and also giving us this. And then in recent year, this. See, every bad influence that goes through a stupid phase once in a while. I'm just going to say that. But from Eddie Brock, in the two versions that I do love, 94 and Spectacular. I mean, look at these two versions of Venom. Classic Venom with the kind of black with the hints of blue coloring around it in order to showcase the comic book shading, to the absolute threat that was Spectacular. That sadly had one freaking episode and then a second one, which, again, I'm mad at, because Spectacular, I love it, but at certain points it felt like it was rushed. The Black Suit got more screen time, which I'm not mad at, because it gave us great scenes. But overall, Venom being a fantastic threat, a menacing villain, a psychotic character that has his own depth and personality, and just when he bonds with Brock, it just amplifies the relationship of Venom and Eddie and their mutual hatred for Peter and Spider-Man. It gave us a rivalry that went great in the original, and then they started working with each other for a bit, and then to being built up so much and then kind of thrown away in Spectacular. But then they fully revived him in the game and made him a threat worthy of the name Venom. Because what he does to the city, he may be the cure, but first, he's the disease. I love doing the voice of Tony Todd's Spider-Man of Venom. It is without a doubt one of the best ones ever, and they could not have picked a more menacing voice to be a menacing monster. From one menacing monster symbiote to the next, we get one that was freaking went right over our heads in the game, with a side mission nonetheless, and also hopefully plans for the next DLC. Again, mentioned in the Spectacular for one small bit, but obviously they couldn't go that far because it was more of a kid's cartoon. Great. But overall, from the 94 version, the world will burn because the world will... Carnage will run throughout the land. Carnage is an absolute... There is nothing like Carnage in Spider-Man. I mean, yeah, they kind of tweaked it a little bit in the Shattered Dimensions game for honestly better reasons, and made him more of a monster instead of a villain, but a great final villain nonetheless. But at the same time, remembering the 1994 one, where a serial killer, Cletus Cassidy, fuses with a new symbiote and becomes the Red Menace himself, Carnage. A creature that is as bloodthirsty and as irredeemable as his counterpart, as his symbiotic counterpart. If Venom is a great villain to the 10, Carnage is basically to the 20s. No remorse, no holding back, and we got that in a video game, I think many years ago, and it bombed. Unless they did it, I can't even remember it was done so long ago. But now having him be actually confirmed in the new game and set up for DLC story, I'm going to have to play free roam for a couple days to get this back into the swing of things, because I am not going into this DLC as with Carnage unprepared after not playing for months. But at the same time, I'm still terrified. Because this is what they did with Venom in the game. I am scared shitless of what they're going to do with Carnage. I mean, he's got razor claws, he's got razor teeth. His tongue could lick me and kill me. He could project his tendrils all over. Oh my God. I'm really excited about how they're going to do Carnage. I am going to hope that they do him a little bit more justice than what they did in Venom 2. Although Woody Harrelson playing Cletus Cassidy is actually one of my favorite parts of that movie. I'm not kidding. It was actually interesting. But having part of the symbiote break off into Cletus Cassidy and merging with his blood, I don't mind it. I liked the change. And the scene where Carnage goes full Carnage is, I don't want to say enjoyable. I want to say accurate. They kept the dark, the gritty, the maniacal stuff that even Jason that's Michael Myers. Jason from Friday the 13th would be shaking in his boots and running back home to mom. But as much as I love Venom and Carnage, two villains beat them out for the number 2 spots. And the number 2 might surprise some people, but number 1, I have my reasons. So Carnage managed to topple some of the other villains to get the number 3 spot. But now we go to number 2. It's not just about brawn, it's about brain power. And Doc Ock, Otto Octavius, is one of Spider-Man's more intellectual villains. And it showcases in every iteration of Doc Ock, we get an amazing scientist whose experiment went wrong. And now he's connected to his mechanical arms that work on his will. And also, Alfred Molina, the guy who was Doc Ock in Raimi's number 2, and then again returned for No Way Home. If I ever get a chance to meet this man, I'm giving him a hug for giving us one of the best Spider-Man villains and one of the best live versions of the villain ever. Because I don't think they can do better than him for a live action. Because his charisma, his acting chops, his voice, you can just tell that whenever he speaks something scientific, you believe he knows what he's talking about. It's not like you can just smack a label on a character and have them say the same thing and make it be the same. It's his voice that gives it what it needs to be. From being the calculating scientist to being the guy who's being manipulated by his own mechanical arms, you feel like he's actually talking to them, and it works beautifully. And in every version of him, we get the 1994 one where it was revealed that Peter knew him when he was a kid as a brilliant scientist and loved him for that. To being a villain who wants to prove the world his genius by ruling the world, and that works. It's such a great villain. And even more so when it's not Doc Ock, like in Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, we get Cyril Patel, who's a little bit different. And it's not just because she's a woman in this green and yellow, slim, leather-looking mechanical suit with the thin robotic arms that look more octopus-like. And, yeah, she was a big menace in that game. A great villain. to one of my favorite spectacular ones, where he worked for, again, obviously he worked for Osborn and decided to become a villain himself. Again, I love the design of having the metallic claw, the tri-pronged metallic claws that also have like a scanner in it. It just works. And later on in the season, trying to rehabilitate, but being the master planner behind the scenes, orchestrating the villains from the shadows, from the lower up to being a threat in the criminal underworld, to giving us one of the most emotional boss fights I've ever played. Like I said in my top 13 final bosses list, Doc Ock at the end of the first Spider-Man game was emotional perfection. I said enough about that in that video, but overall, Otto can do no wrong in any iteration, primarily the ones I've seen. And that little hint that they gave us at the end of number 2, I'm looking forward to a comeback. And we'll be welcoming Otto back with open arms. We are now at my number 1 villain of Spider-Man. Now, a lot of people's number 1s have most likely been knocked down the list, from Venom to Green Goblin to Doc Ock to Carnage. This villain has been snubbed so many times, it's not even funny. I mean, it's not even funny. This is a villain that has been seen primarily in media, outside of the comics, twice. Alistair Smythe was given one single iteration, and that god-awful one in the video game that was, again, shit. But my number 1 has been in 2 iterations. One in the first series, and one in a video game, where he was voiced by not 1, but 2 of my top favorite voice actors of all time. And he was the first to beat out Osborn as being a glider-riding menace of Halloween. Steve Blum voiced him in the Shattered Dimensions game. And right after, 2 years after his debut as the Clown Prince of Crime, we have Mark Hamill lending his voice to a villain that was kept in shadows for so long in the series. And has been a favorite villain of mine for years. Hoping to hear that maniacal laughter come from the sky as death rains from above in that glider wearing that traditional orange cape. I am talking about the Hobgoblin himself. Oh, fuck yes, the Hobgoblin. I mean, I almost spelled it out for you guys right there. When I saw that artwork at a convention in my town years ago, I had to have it because nobody cares about Hobgoblin anymore, but I do. Hobby has been my favorite Spider-Man villain for years. Ever since I watched the original 1994 version, he was just so menacing, and the laugh and the voice of Mark Hamill. Because here's the thing. Hamill lent his voice to 2 great villains in DC and Marvel. And that just showcases how much I love the man. From his banter to his manipulation, pitting Kingpin and Osborn against each other. and constantly outwitting them and probably being one of the better villains to ever go up against Spidey. It just showcases how well of a villain he is. And even in the Shadow Dimensions game, when he's a cybernetic gargoyle-looking creature, fantastic. Such a great villain. And at the same time, there hasn't been word one of the Hobgoblin for decades now. Literally decades. Because 1994 and 2010 is when Shattered Dimensions came out. So for so long, no one has done Hobgoblin. No one. Spectacular. The fan-made one I found was going to use him. But again, that's only a fever dream. And because it's going to be, 94, 04, 10, 14, for going almost, this is the year of the 40 years of the original Spider-Man animated series. I'm hoping, and I'm not hoping here, I'm hoping, but I'm begging Insomniac, please, give us the Hobgoblin. I mean, I know you guys are most likely going to do something with Green Goblin because of what happened. But at the same time, maybe to throw us off the scent, give us a Hobgoblin. Please. Pretty please, with a pumpkin bomb on top. Overall, the laugh, the genius, and okay, full disclosure, I can't remember what his real name was, so I'm going to look it up for the last time. Okay, not what I was looking up. Okay, let's see. Come on, work. 94. Yes, I want this. What the? Businessman? Jason Macendale? A petty crook? A petty? No way. Wait a minute. He was a petty crook? A petty crook outsmarted Kingpin, Osborn, and Alistair Smythe by making all three go against each other. Basically beat down Spider-Man on a daily basis, and he was a petty crook? You know, I'd say that kind of brings him down a little bit, but at the same time, I'm thinking, I put Kaiser Sose, Verbal Kent, so at the top of my movie villains list because of how well he portrayed us, the little guy being the big guy. So I guess that kind of works. They could definitely do something in the game where, and also he was also a philanthropist and a businessman who was engaged to Felicia Hardy, I believe, if I remember correctly. But they really need to do something unimaginably creative. This is where they're going to go for the if they do ever bring him back into a video game. Don't make him so on the nose of who he is. Maybe someone Spider-Man bumps into and is something super nonchalant like that. But again, like I said, his genius, his menacing attire, and his creepy mask, to the gobweb inhibitor that he has, to the pumpkin bombs, to being able to manipulate 3 genius villains against each other, all the while keep making Spider-Man the #1 enemy. Hobby definitely deserves to be my #1 Spider-Man villain. And hopefully we'll get more of him in future iterations, because, hell boy, with the way Marvel's going right now, I'm not holding my breath. And that's it for the top 13 list. I hope you guys enjoy it. Obviously, there are a couple villains I left off the list for big reasons. So what are villains that you seem to like, that you like, and that should have been on the list? Or what are some ones that you really like? Like, comment, subscribe down below. Leave a good comment about your favorite villains. And join me next week, ladies and gentlemen, where I swing in twice into the next video. Seriously, I really need to find writers who can write better jokes for me. I know I don't have writers. I'm just saying. Okay, yeah, that did kind of suck. Join me next week where it's a game review where... Okay, you know what? I'm not being nonchalant about this one. It's Marvel's Spider-Man 2, and hopefully it got as big a praise as the first one. And hopefully I can keep up the same momentum. This is Gamer K, logging out.